Hello there, Stuart Jones here with a quick word about the free online audiobook version of my first novel. It's called The World Upstairs, and it's an adult psychological thriller. Howard Tremaine lives alone in a tiny two-room flat in London. He's scared shitless about going outside and seeing anyone. So when a ravishing girl takes an interest in him out of the blue, it's frankly traumatic. Life is about to change on a grand scale for Howard, but how can he foresee the bizarre and unexpected ending to these developments? Here's an excerpt from Chapter 1. Emerging from his bathroom, rubbing dry his hands, Howard Tremaine picked up yesterday's local paper and slumped onto the small sofa in the centre of his cramped front room, facing a window. He looked up as the first pitter-pat of rain spattered the glass. "Good," he said aloud, and flicked through the tedious car adverts. A headline caught his eye. Man found after 5 years. Thames Valley Police were reported to be baffled last night after the body of a man in his 60s was discovered in his flat in the city centre on Thursday last. The man, Herbert Samuel Jenkins, was discovered by 2 council workers who were making inquiries about council tax payment arrears. Having received no response from knocking on the door, the men became aware of a pungent odour similar to fish gone lousy, as one of the men, who do not wish to be named, later described it. The police were informed and the door was forced open, to reveal the skeletal remains of Mr. Jenkins, 64, in an armchair in front of a television set which was still on. A tray of decayed food was in his lap, the body was fully dressed, and the television set was white-hot to the touch. It appears that Mr. Jenkins, who had been alienated from his family for some years and lived as a bachelor, had suffered a fatal cardiac arrest. The coroner and social services have expressed grave concern over the fact that the deceased had lain undiscovered for such a long period. The day's newspaper found on top of the television was dated 5 years earlier. That could be me one day. Nobody would miss me. If I fell ill or had a heart attack, if I had a fall and cracked a rib, nobody would ever know. The news item stayed on his mind throughout the remainder of the day, as he did the washing up, listening to the radio, cleaned the kitchen, and went to bed with another Dorothy L. Sayers. Contentment came in a sluggish tide of well-being when he drew the curtains, shutting out the last of the day. Switching on the bedside lamp and climbing into bed, he began reading a new novel from the library. He was going through a whodunit phase, this being the 4th detective book he'd ordered from the library in recent weeks. Most of the time he would pinpoint the miscreant long before the sleuth. My detecting skills are wasted. Perhaps I should have been a policeman. He lay down the book and removed his spectacles, turning onto his side, listening to the ferocity of the rain against the window. He was woken by the sound of his doorbell at 11 o'clock the following morning, and he noticed with a groan that the sky had cleared and it looked like being a warm and sunny day. Taciturn by nature, Howard Tremaine hated the summer, principally because he felt that everyone else in the world was living a real life, having fun, relationships, socializing, all things he was uncomfortable with. During winter, people were more likely to stay in their homes, and subsequently he felt the world was forced to come down to his level, giving him the nearest thing to a sense of normality since his childhood. Pulling on his ancient dressing gown, he opened the door. Gordon Rice stood there with a pile of books under an arm and a packet of coffee in the other hand. He was red in the face and panting slightly. "Can't you move downstairs to the ground floor, or get a lift put in?" "Gordon, it's only 2 floors. Come in." Howard yawned and scratched his groin. "Jesus, look at the state of you," said Gordon, as he turned and shut the door before dropping the books onto the sofa. "Thanks for remembering the books," said Howard. "It's nearly lunchtime and you've just reared your head. You're sleeping a life away, Tremaine." "It's my life, isn't it?" Gordon frowned unpleasantly and headed to the tiny kitchen area that led off the front room, filling the kettle and preparing coffee. "Look, you twatty hermit," he rasped. "I don't have to come here any more. If you didn't see me, you'd have no contact with the outside world whatever. Go and wash, you fucking pong." Screwing up his face in disgust, he walked into the kitchen, opened the coffee pack and spooned out a large helping into the filter machine, a gift he had given Howard last Christmas. He opened the fridge for the milk. "You still live like a teenager," he called out as he noticed the scarcity of food. Howard and Gordon had been friends since they met at school, aged about 11. Gordon's family had moved into the area when his father was given a job at a local pub, and he and Howard had hit it off immediately. This was unusual because Howard had found it impossible to make friends up to that point. Abstracted, shy, he had been left aside by the more gregarious children until somebody was finally prepared to spend time with him and listen to his likes and dislikes, taste in fiction, music, cinema. That somebody had been Gordon Rice, newly arrived at the secondary modern and, by default, friendless. They had then been inseparable and shared a passion for glam rock, science fantasy, and the thrillers of Alfred Hitchcock. As they entered their 20s, these had been replaced by post-New Wave records, Anthony Powell's A Dance to the Music of Time novels, and European art house movies. Then, during their 30s, a major disruption occurred. Gordon had enjoyed a regular supply of short-lived flings with girls of varying degrees of suitability, unlike Howard, who, after a couple of early unsuccessful attempts, had always been terrified of the opposite sex. Tall, slim, dark-haired, armed with a healthy sense of humour, and blessed with saturnine features, Gordon never had problems finding skirt. In the late 80s he had attended an exhibition of paintings by local artists at a small fashionable gallery in town, where he had been impressed by a series of striking figurative subjects. He was then introduced to the artist, and was even more impressed. She was a stunning redhead, possessed of a grace and humility to match her artistic gifts. Thereafter, Howard saw little of his friend for some months, as Gordon's time was wholly taken up with his adored girlfriend, Olivia. At the wedding reception a year later, Howard was conspicuous by his absence. Gordon looked around the small living room with distaste as he carried the coffee in. Howard emerged from the bathroom, grinning, rubbing his face dry with a towel. He was dressed in black trousers and a white T-shirt. "Look at this place," said Gordon with a wave of the hand. "It's like a prison cell." They settled onto the greasy sofa. Included in his sweeping gesture were Howard's television, coffee table, and laptop computer. "How, exactly?" asked Howard in a dry voice. "We have been here before," he thought to himself resignedly. "It's not exactly a home, is it, Howard? It's so bare. Functional, I suppose." "It suits my needs. It requires a feminine touch to soften it up a bit, make it lived in, warm, comfortable." "There's not much chance of that, is there, old son?" said Howard. Gordon drank a deep mouthful of coffee, then placed the cup on the low table in front of the sofa. "No, and we know why, don't we, old son? You don't go out. Therefore you don't meet any potential women. And when you do actually come into contact with someone interesting, you can't talk to them, let alone attract them. What the hell is going to happen to you, Howard? You're 47. Do you want to die in this fucking room, alone and unwanted? Don't you want someone to care for you? Someone to care for?" Howard flushed uncomfortably, blushing and despising himself for these social shortcomings. Gordon, emotional, continued. "You've had a perpetual grudge against the entire human race ever since I've known you, and that's unattractive. And the more you hate everyone for hating you, the more unattractive you grow, and the more they go on hating you." "People don't hate me. They're indifferent to me," said Howard, absently gazing out of the window at a beautiful April day. Why not go to the online audiobook version of my first novel, a gripping and provocative adult thriller, to find out? The web address is http://theworldupstairs.blogspot.com.